Tarana Burke, I just wanted to start this interview by saying thank you for the decades of work that you've done helping women and children who've been victims of sexual assault, because people who do that work really cannot be thanked enough for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
More than 11 years before Me Too became globally famous, you were using that phrase in your work. What were the origins of it?
I was living and working in the South in America, and I was running a youth program for Black and brown girls. And I was really trying to fill a void that was in my community. I had so many young girls who had been subjected to sexual violence and had no outlets, had no resources. And I had that experience as a child with no outlet and no resources. And I really wanted to fill that gap and fill that void. And so that work became the way that I did that.
When did you realise how pervasive sexual assault and abuse were, that it wasn't just a matter of isolated cases?
I remember being in a classroom, and when we had first started using the term Me Too, and we gave each of the girls, we had done a workshop, we gave each of the girls in the classroom of about 60 girls maybe, a piece of sticky note and said, tell us 3 things you learned in the class, and if you have survived sexual violence, write Me Too. If you want to, if you feel compelled to. And we did that so that, nobody was singled out to give a sheet of paper. And when we went back to our hotel room and went through the notes, more than half of them said Me Too. And I thought, we are onto something that is so major and so needed, bigger than I ever imagined.
When you started using Me Too back in 2006, you were very clear in your writing and your work at the time, and indeed ever since, that it's one thing to share a story of abuse, but that it's critically important that once a person's done that they are helped to process that and come to terms with it. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Absolutely. What I think happens a lot of times is that we urge survivors to share their story. And so you are re-traumatizing not only the person, but the people who are hearing it. There's not a tremendous amount of value in hearing the trauma that happened. There's so much value in understanding what happened post-trauma, because surviving sexual violence isn't just about the point of trauma and violence. It's about all of the trauma that you hold in the days after it. Right? And becomes salacious to a certain point when we just want to hear about the gory details about what happened to people. That's the biggest part of the story, but it's not the only part. And to some degree, it's not the most important part.
What do you think is the best way to educate children about protecting themselves?
I think we have to start really early with young people about respect and boundaries, right? I think we make it into something that is sinister and bad. And because sexual violence isn't about sex, then talking to children about protecting themselves isn't sexual. It's about respect. It's about boundaries. It's about saying, if you can teach children to say please and thank you and not to run with scissors, then you can teach them about healthy boundaries, about not touching people without consent.
And the other thing that you write about is that it's also an issue about children believing that they are worthy of being allowed to have boundaries and that they're worthy of being treated well and saying, no, I don't accept this for myself.
We raise our children to think that all adults around them have authority and that adults' knowledge is absolute. Right. And so the children believe that, for instance, when we go over for holidays, we go visit other people and we say, go hug your aunt or go hug your uncle or even, a friend of the family. We don't give children the option for how they use their body or how they express themselves. And they are little human beings. And we should start early, just like we teach them boundaries and respect and consent. We should ask consent, and we should model that in our children so that they understand that they are worthy to make their own decisions. Let them start making decisions early, and we should also reinforce their worth. The real world is that you are a worthy human being because you were born. And there are so many things in the world from the day they were born, particularly if they are children of color or marginalized in any way. There are enough things in the world that are going to tell them that they aren't worthy. So as parents and guardians and loved ones, it's up to us to build up their sense of self-worth as a way to safeguard them from the people who will try to use that as a tool to traumatize them.
Tell us about the day when you woke up and Me Too, #MeToo was trending.
I went to sleep a very normal person like everybody else, and I woke up and my life's work was spread across the internet. And it was It was very scary for me. As a Black woman in America, I have seen my fair share of discrimination and bias and, quite frankly, racism. I've seen Black women be relegated to the back and our voices not be heard. And I didn't see how it would be possible that people would believe that I had been doing this work under the same name, in the same way. I had a moment that where my life's work and my purpose all came together in one moment, right? And I had to put aside my ego for a second and realize that this was an opportunity. It wasn't about taking something away from me. It was actually a gift that was given to me. And I was able to insert myself in the moment and contribute rather than complain about what was being taken from me. But it was initially very scary.
Your work, as we discussed, has its origins in sexual abuse and violence against Black and brown women and children. And when Me Too started trending, initially the most prominent women associated with it were rich and white. How did you feel about that?
Well, I didn't feel like that was a connection to me or my work, right? Because I had been working, like you said, in the community with marginalized people. And so that was not something that felt like it was a part of anything to do with my work. But what was a lesson for me, and I think, we're never too old or too seasoned to learn. It was a lesson for me that we are all connected in one way or another. And what I did learn is that those women in Hollywood and those people who were famous and rich and whatever needed the same things that the little Black girls in Selma, Alabama needed. They needed to be seen. They needed to be heard. They needed an outlet. And they needed to be validated. They needed to be believed, right? And that's what Me Too gave them. We know hashtag Me Too because 12 million people responded to that hashtag in 24 hours. And the large majority of those 12 million people were everyday folks. They were just like you and I.
There's a segment of women who are Me Too devotees who use a slogan, I believe her, and they use it to mean that any woman who makes an accusation against a man has to be believed. What do you make of that?
That's not what it actually means. And I think I'm glad to have an opportunity to clear that up. When people say, I believe her or believe survivors, it's not believe anybody who comes forward with an accusation. What we have to understand is the history of sexual violence. The history of sexual violence is that when people, particularly women, come forward with an accusation or disclosure, they tend to be not believed at the point of disclosure. So think about this. On a college campus, a girl comes forward and says, I was sexually assaulted. I was raped last night. The first question people ask is, were you drunk? What were you wearing? Where were you? Why were you there? Right? We question, we obscure, we do everything else but believe the person. Because if you believe, it doesn't mean you go forward and you condemn the man automatically. It means you investigate. It means you take it seriously. It means you don't shut down the survivor. I'm a Black woman. There is no part of me that could have a mantra that says believe all women. Because in America, sexual violence has been, and I guess across the world, sexual violence has been weaponized against Black men. But also in America, we have the second highest rate of sexual violence here. Black women are largely not believed when we come forward. And so when you hear people say believe survivors, take it out of your mind that it's a blanket statement that means that anybody who comes forward with an accusation is telling the truth. What you should hear is, let me take this seriously.
It is, as you said earlier, a weight to hear tragic stories and to help people through them, particularly when you've experienced trauma yourself, as you have. You now have also the additional weight of a high public profile. How are you going yourself with all of that?
It's difficult. I mean, I think it's a double-edged sword, right? Because very few high-profile people with a lot of visibility have been known as a crusader for this issue. And so that means that people who have experienced sexual violence haven't had a person to look to in the public eye. Right? I mean, we had Anita Hill 30 years ago, and we still have Anita Hill. But there haven't been a lot of champions. And so I feel a sense of responsibility to be somebody, who I know when I meet a survivor on the street, they know that I'm somebody who understands them. And so I want to remain that person. But I'm also a human being. And I'm still healing because healing is a forever process. And so I just try to balance it. And I ask people for the grace that they want. the same kind of space and grace that they want in their life, I need it for myself. But I do feel a sense of duty because, survivors get a bad rap. We have a lot of ups and downs, and we don't have a lot of places and soft places to land. And so if I can, that's what my book is trying to do. If I can offer that to people, I definitely want to do that.
Tarana Burke, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for all your work.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.